You and Stanley graduate Quantico on the same Friday in June and spend the entire ceremony elbowing each other like 12-year-olds every time someone mispronounces a name. You have known Stanley for 3 years. You met in the application process, which is a strange place to meet a friend, but makes complete sense in retrospect, because the kind of person who applies to the FBI and the kind of person you are turned out to be the same kind of person, which is the kind of person who genuinely believes that the law means something and that spending a career enforcing it is a worthwhile way to spend a life. You both believe this completely on the Friday in June. You will believe it for different lengths of time. The Academy is 16 weeks of the most comprehensive professional training you have ever experienced. Firearms, legal studies, behavioral science, surveillance, evidence collection, ethics, which gets its own dedicated week, which in retrospect is either very reassuring or a significant warning, depending on when you are reading this sentence. You and Stanley are in the same cohort. You compete on everything. Not aggressively. The way people compete when they genuinely like each other, and the competition is just how the affection expresses itself. You beat him on the shooting range. He beats you on the legal exam. You tie on the physical fitness assessment, which neither of you admits is a tie. On graduation day, Stanley shakes your hand before the ceremony. He says we're the good guys now. You tell him you know. He says I'm serious. That means something. You tell him it means something to you too. You mean it. Level 2, the rookie agent. Your first field office is Chicago. Stanley gets Chicago too. This was not arranged. It is either coincidence or the universe's way of setting up everything that happens next. You share an apartment for the first 6 months because Chicago rent on a federal salary is the government's way of reminding you that you did not take this job for the money. The work is good, not glamorous. The movies have not adequately prepared you for the volume of paperwork involved in being a federal agent. You spend a significant portion of your first year writing reports about things that were not worth writing reports about, and a smaller but more interesting portion actually doing the thing you came here to do. You work financial crimes. Specifically, you investigate fraud, white-collar work, the kind where the crime scenes are spreadsheets and the criminals wear suits and the violence is invisible because it happens to bank accounts and retirement funds rather than to bodies, but is no less real for being invisible. Stanley works organized crime. You eat lunch together 3 days a week in the break room that smells like burnt coffee and someone's aggressive meal prep. Stanley has opinions about everything and delivers them without being asked. He has an opinion about the coffee, the carpet, the parking situation, the new supervisor's management style, and the specific brand of terrible that is the vending machine on the 3rd floor. You listen to all of it. He is almost always right. Your case closure rate in year 1 is good. Year 2, it is better. You are identified early as someone with a specific aptitude for following financial trails, the kind of patient, methodical intelligence that can look at 1,000 transactions and find the 3 that do not belong. This is a skill with significant legitimate applications in federal law enforcement. It also has significant illegitimate applications. You will discover this later. For now, you are a good agent at the beginning of a career you intend to spend entirely on the right side of the law you swore to uphold. Stanley would agree with this assessment. For now. Level 3, the fall. It starts, as these things always start, with something small enough to feel like nothing. You are 31 years old. You have been in the bureau for 6 years. Your divorce finalized 4 months ago. The apartment you are now paying for alone in Chicago costs what you and your ex-wife used to split. You have a daughter named Maya, who is 7 years old, and lives with her mother in a house you helped pay for during a marriage that did not survive the hours and the secrecy and the accumulated weight of a job that asks you to give everything and returns a salary that is adequate and not more than that. A man named Declan Walsh contacts you through a mutual acquaintance. Walsh is a money manager. He manages money for people who have significant quantities of it and significant reasons to want it to exist in forms that are not easily traced. He is not a target of any investigation you are currently running. He is just a man who knows someone who mentioned that there is a particular FBI agent in financial crimes with a particular skill set that could be useful to a particular kind of client. He takes you to lunch. The restaurant is the kind where the menu does not have prices on it, which is either extremely elegant or an ambush depending on your perspective. Walsh orders for both of you without asking. The food is extraordinary. He does not ask you to do anything illegal at lunch. He talks about his work, about the interesting problems that arise when you have significant amounts of money moving through multiple jurisdictions. He talks about how useful it would be, theoretically, to have a sense of when certain regulatory matters were being scrutinized. Just a general sense. Nothing specific, more like a weather forecast than a tip. He says theoretically. He says it 3 times. You go back to the office. You tell yourself you are not going to call him. You call him 6 days later. Not to agree to anything, just to understand what the parameters of a hypothetical arrangement might look like. Just to gather information in the way that a federal agent gathers information, which is to say, with no intention of acting on it and every intention of acting on it. The first time you pass along information, it is genuinely minor, a routine review that is going to conclude with no findings. Walsh is grateful in a way that is expressed via a wire transfer to an account you opened under a name that is not your name at a bank that is not in this country. $22,000. You look at the number for a long time. Then you send Walsh's client a very thorough and entirely fabricated explanation for why the review found nothing. You go home. You make dinner. You call Maya and read her a story over the phone until she falls asleep. You feel fine. This is the part that should concern you more than it does. Level 4. The double life. 6 months in, Stanley notices something. Not the money. You are not stupid about the money. The money lives in places that a federal agent with your skill set knows how to make invisible, because you spent 6 years learning how criminals hide money, and the education turns out to be transferable in both directions. Stanley notices you. Specifically, he notices small things that do not add up to a conclusion, but add up to a question. The new watch. The explanation for the new watch, which is a birthday gift from a family member that Stanley knows is not particularly flush. The way you handle certain case files now, with the specific carefulness of a person who has something to lose from a particular outcome. The way you have stopped complaining about your divorce, not because you feel better about it, but because something has replaced the financial anxiety that used to fuel the complaints. He does not say anything. Not yet. Instead, he starts watching you the way you watch a spreadsheet when you know 3 transactions do not belong. Not searching for proof, just paying attention, filing things. You know he is watching. You know because you are an FBI agent trained to detect surveillance, and Stanley is your best friend, and you know every tell he has, including the one where he is pretending not to pay attention to something he is absolutely paying attention to. You ignore it. You are making $40,000 a month from Walsh and his clients, and the money is changing things in ways that you have told yourself are sustainable and that are not sustainable. You moved to a better apartment. You paid off the debt from the divorce. Maya's school is now a private school in Lincoln Park. These are things you explain with a series of stories that each make sense individually, and that Stanley, if he were to lay them all out on a table, would recognize immediately as a pattern. He is laying them on the table. You can see him doing it. One evening after work, he stops you in the parking garage. He says, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer me straight." You tell him to ask. He says, "Are you okay?" You look at him for a moment. You tell him you are great. Best you have been in years, actually. The divorce thing has settled. You are feeling good about the work. Maya is doing well in her new school. Stanley looks at you the way he looked at you on graduation day, when he said, "We are the good guys now," except this time, the look has something else in it that was not there then. He says the new school. That is private, right? You tell him your parents helped. He says your parents are retired school teachers. You tell him they have savings. He says right, he says. And the watch. You tell him it was a gift. He says right, he says okay. He gets in his car. He does not say another word. You watch his taillights disappear, and you stand in the parking garage for a while, and you think about what just happened, and what it means, and what Stanley is going to do with the table he is building. You also think about the fact that he did not say, "I'm happy for you." Stanley always says, "I'm happy for you" when good things happen. He did not say it this time. Level 5. The investigation. Internal Affairs opens a file on you on a Thursday. You know this because Walsh has a contact inside the department who is not you, and who is less careful than you, and who will eventually be the reason 3 people go to prison, but that is later. For now you know the file exists, and you know it is early stage, and you know you have time if you are careful, and you are always careful. What you do not know is that Stanley went to your supervisor 2 weeks ago. He did not go with accusations. He went with observations, small things, the kind of thing a good agent notices about a colleague. He framed it as concern. I have noticed some changes in my partner, and I want to flag it, because I would rather be wrong than not say anything. He was not wrong. Your supervisor passed it to Internal Affairs, who opened the file and assigned 2 investigators who have now been watching you for 11 days in a way that is very professional and that you would not have detected if you were not an FBI agent who knows exactly what 11 days of professional surveillance looks like. You detect it on day 8. You spend 3 days deciding what to do. Walsh tells you to stay calm. He says his contact inside the department says the file is thin. He says as long as you do not do anything that adds to it, you are fine. He says this in the way that people who are not the one at risk say things like, "You are fine." You call Stanley. Not to confess, to talk. To hear his voice and try to figure out from the specific frequencies of how he speaks to you, whether he is the person who went to your supervisor. He picks up on the second ring. He sounds normal. You talk about nothing for 20 minutes. Maya. A case he is working. The vending machine on the 3rd floor has been restocked, and it is somehow worse. You laugh. He laughs. You hang up. You sit with the phone in your hand, and you think about the fact that Stanley can laugh like that on a phone call with you, while simultaneously being the person who put your name in a file. And you think about what that means about the kind of person he is, and what it says about the kind of person you have become, that the difference between you two is now this large and growing. You do not sleep. The next morning you come into the office and Stanley is already at his desk, and he looks up when you walk in, and he says morning, and you say morning, and you both go to work, and the normalcy of it is the most terrifying thing that has happened to you in months. Level 6. The arrest. They come on a Tuesday morning at 7:42. Not dramatically. There is no raid. There is no team in tactical gear. There are 2 internal affairs investigators, and your supervisor, and a woman from the U.S. Attorney's Office, and they are all in the conference room when you arrive, and your supervisor asks you to join them, and you know immediately, and completely, and without any remaining ambiguity, what is happening. You sit down. They begin. The file is not thin anymore. Walsh's contact was arrested 6 weeks ago for an unrelated matter and produced information in exchange for considerations that are now your problem. The wire transfers, the account, the specific case files where your decisions cannot be explained by the evidence available at the time, the restaurant without prices on the menu, which it turns out has a camera in the lobby, and Walsh is recognizable, and you are recognizable, and you had lunch there 4 times. 4 times. You sit in the conference room for 2 hours. Then you are placed on administrative leave. Then you are charged. You walk out of the building through the lobby you have walked through every morning for 8 years. You pass the break room that smells like burnt coffee. You pass the vending machine on the 3rd floor that is somehow always worse. You press the button for the elevator, and you wait, and the elevator opens, and Stanley is inside it. He looks at you. You look at him. The elevator is very quiet. He says, "I am sorry this is happening." You look at him for a long time. You tell him you know it was him. He does not deny it. He looks at you with an expression that contains things that are too large for the elevator and that neither of you has the words for right now. He says, "I did not want to do it." You say, "But you did." He says, "Yes." The elevator reaches the lobby. You both get out. You go in different directions. Level 7. The reckoning. The trial takes 4 months. Your lawyer is good. The government's case is better. Walsh cooperates. His contact cooperates. The restaurant footage is clear. The wire transfers are documented with a thoroughness that you recognize as the work of someone who learned evidence collection at Quantico and applied it specifically to dismantling you. You plead guilty to 4 counts. The sentencing hearing is on a Wednesday morning. Your ex-wife is there with Maya, who is 9 now, and is sitting very still, the way children sit still when they understand that something important and sad is happening, and they have not yet been given the framework to process it. You do not look at Maya directly during the sentencing, because if you look at Maya directly during the sentencing, you will not be able to hold yourself together, and the only thing you have left to give her in this room is the image of her father holding himself together. The judge reads the sentence. 7 years. Federal facility. You know what that means. You spent 8 years putting people in federal facilities. Now you are one of them. Stanley visits on the 14th month. Not the first month, not the second, the 14th, which means he spent 13 months deciding whether to come, and then came anyway, which is very Stanley, and which you think about every day between month 1 and month 14. He sits across from you in the visiting room. He looks the same. He is wearing the jacket he always wears on Saturdays. He drove 4 hours to be here, and he looks like he drove 4 hours to be here, which means he did not stop anywhere, and probably did not eat anything, which is also very Stanley. You look at each other for a moment. He says, "I brought you something." He slides a printout across the table. It is a photograph of the vending machine on the 3rd floor. Someone has put a handwritten sign on it that says, "Out of order," in letters large enough to be visible from the hallway. You look at it. You laugh. Not politely. Actually laugh. The specific laugh that only Stanley can produce in you, because it is built from 15 years of shared references and the specific chemistry of two people who understand each other's exact frequencies. Stanley laughs too. Then you are both quiet. He says, "I need to say something." You tell him to say it. He says, "I went to the supervisor because I could not watch you disappear and do nothing." He says, "I knew what was happening before I had proof, and I went anyway, because doing nothing felt like choosing it with you, and I could not choose it with you." He says that is not something he is sorry for. You tell him you know. He says, "But," he says, "but I am sorry that it landed on you the way it landed. I am sorry I did not come to you first. I told myself you would not have listened, and maybe that is true, and maybe it is not, and I will think about that for a long time." You tell him you would not have listened. He says, "Yeah." He says, "I figured." You tell him you are not angry at him. He looks at you like he is not sure whether to believe that. You tell him it was the right thing to do, that it was the thing a good agent does, that it was the thing he said you both were going to be, on the Friday in June at Quantico, when the whole future was in front of you, and everything was still possible. He said, "We are the good guys now." He was right. He just stayed one longer than you did. Stanley looks at the table for a moment. Then he says, "Maya came to the office last week. Her school does a career day. She said her dad used to work there." You are quiet. He says she is doing okay. She asks about you. You tell him to tell her you are reading, that you have read more in 14 months than in the previous 10 years, that you are going to have a lot to talk about when you get out. He says, "When you get out." You say, "When?" He nods. He folds the photograph of the vending machine and slides it back across the table. He says, "Keep it." You take it. He stands up. He puts on the jacket. He looks at you one more time with the expression of a man who has made peace with something complicated and has decided that peace is going to have to be enough. He says, "I'll be back next month." You tell him he does not have to do that. He says, "I know." He comes back next month, and the month after that, and every month until the day you walk out, and Stanley is in the parking lot in the same jacket, and he says nothing, and you say nothing, and you get in the car, and he drives, and somewhere between the facility and the city you pass a convenience store, and he pulls in without explaining why, and comes out with 2 coffees, and hands you one. You take it. It is terrible. You tell him this. He says, "Welcome back," he says. Some things have not changed. You drive the rest of the way in the kind of silence that is not empty, but full. The kind that only exists between two people who have been through something real and come out the other side still speaking. Some things, it turns out, survive. Not everything, but some things.